There's a whole symphony of pressures and stresses felt by musicians today, so I wanted to continue in my quest to delve into their minds. Today I chat to Mikey Chapman, vocalist of Mallory Knox, to focus on the particular strains put on frontmen and see what coping mechanisms help on those days where you don't necessarily feel like being that public figure. For the first part, we sat down backstage at the Hippodrome in Kingston. In Kingston with Mikey from Mallory Knox.
Hey.
And today we're going to be a bit more serious than our usual self.
Yes, we are.
We're going to do our very interviews in the past.
We're going to do our very best.
Yes.
It's always hard.
Oh, is it?
See, this is what I'm saying. You can't. Got to be sensible.
Yeah, serious.
No childish joking.
Yeah, because we're talking about very serious matters
yes,
today. We're going to be talking about things like stress, anxiety,
yes,
coping mechanisms, and all that jazz.
That's right.
So your album's just come out.
It has, yeah.
How have you been feeling around this time? Because it's pressured, I imagine.
Quite stressed and anxious, actually. Funnily enough.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, it's quite poignant, really. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's the most amazing thing. We've been building up to this point for like a long time now, and been working really hard behind the scenes and kind of doing all that stuff, all the while kind of sacrificing the time we've been able to have kind of out on the road with everyone and going out to shows and stuff. So it's a big moment of kind of like putting your musical baby out into the world, and also kind of hoping that you haven't been away long enough that it's going to be, you know, sort of not received as you want it to be. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of like testing the water with a new record and things. So there's pressure and there's a little bit of sort of anxiousness about it, but it's all in a positive direction, hopefully. So
do you find the more records you do, because you've got more invested in it, more years,
yeah,
and also you've got an awareness and responsibility level as you're an adult,
yeah,
do you find it's even more pressured the further you go?
I think quite possibly, yeah. I mean, I suppose I haven't analysed it to that point, but I think when you, as you go from like record to record, there's always development and a progression and a sort of like movement in your timeline that you can sort of like visibly see. You know, we all move through our lives and evolve and change as people, but we have this incredible lifestyle where it's documented. You know, like you listen back through the records and how you were feeling or how you were sounding or the music that influenced you at that time, and you can hear back at that and different parts, and as such it kind of creates a very stark sort of contrast to how far you've come and things like that. And I suppose it kind of makes you realise just how long and how hard and how much effort you've put into what you're doing. So definitely, I think it does mount ever so slightly.
And during that period, you probably learn who you are a bit more as well, and you can see in the songs, you understand maybe more of the lyrics in different ways.
Yeah, I think so for sure. I mean, especially as we've kind of, I think especially the jump between asymmetry and this one, there's been a lot more. There's been a lot more life lessons, I think, learned in the time between the two. I don't know whether that's just because, you know, of the age we're at and you're kind of out of that. I mean, for me, a lot of like my early 20s and mid 20s and was kind of about debauchery and kind of just living in the moment and kind of not really caring about the future and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, it was fun, but it wasn't very reflective and it wasn't very grown up of me, I suppose. And as I'm coming to the point, I'm certainly not saying I'm grown up either by now, but as you move slowly towards the inevitability of growing up, you begin to see certain traits and certain aspects of your life that you kind of want to change and you want to move around and motivate or kind of enact a change in yourself, essentially, you know, and that I hope is reflected in some ways on the record.
I think it is.
I think so.
Yeah, good. I wanted to focus on the fact that you are the front man, and to an extent you are the focal point, often the face of the band.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? The fact that maybe in some people's eyes the buck stops with you,
yeah,
whether it's good or bad.
No, for sure. I mean, it's a good question, really, because it is just that. You know, like for a lot of bands, they're marketed and branded as like the singer and then the kind of band behind. I mean, I don't think you'd ever meet a singer necessarily, well actually you probably would meet a few, but they're kind of dickish, that would kind of think it was all about them. But you know, I suppose that's one of the bigger issues, is that it is, in our case, the five of us who all work equally as hard,
Yeah.
and all have as much invested and all have as much love in this band as I do, and sometimes when their contributions are belittled in some way, even unintentionally by the attentions of people, it can cause not so much a rift between us, but a bit for myself personally, a bit of dilemma of consciousness, my conscience, and kind of worrying that maybe I'm taking too much of the limelight and too much of the gratitude and the graciousness of other people and stuff. It can be quite kind of like, oh yeah, thank you so much, but don't forget everyone else. Like it's that kind of thing. That's I suppose another layer on top of the million and one things that my brain's thinking about at one time. As well.
You want to do your job as the frontman, which is being that force to push things out.
Sure,
and
yeah.
be like the vocal person.
Absolutely,
but
yeah.
at the same time, you've got conscience there, your mates as well.
Definitely, and I think as well, there's just for myself personally, I think I have confidence issues in particular ways. Not necessarily that I'm not confident in my abilities, but I'm very aware that a lot of people are out there at the moment making noises and making points and using their voices not necessarily in the most constructive or healthy of ways. We've got a society, in a lot of ways largely based in sort of shallow kind of immediacy. It's kind of this just this like instant gratification kind of thing that's so centered around money, and the value of people is based solely around what they can do for you, or the financial value of of their bank balance or whatever. That it kind of makes me aware that it's very easy for people to be influencers and use a voice in a way that isn't necessarily very helpful or constructive to or conducive to a society that I ideally would like to put goodness into. Do you know what I mean? So I kind of second guess myself all the time. I want to make sure that I'm saying the right things at the right times, in the right kind of ways to inspire people or to motivate people or whatever it might be. And as such, you kind of always like that. I suppose that responsibility becomes both a blessing and a curse, because there's always that like
such a
second
responsibility.
guess. Do you know what? Does
It?
that make sense?
That's an added pressure for
Yeah,
you,
I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm not like the Pope or something. I'm not like speaking to millions of people and stuff, but you still have that. I mean, I think even if it was just one person following us or listening to what I had to say, I'd still want to make sure that I wasn't sending them up shit creek without a paddle, like not
send out good messages.
That's right, putting some goodness into the world and trying to influence that in some way.
I think on the album you kind of make a comment about that and the fact that in some ways we are so connected in this instant nature, but we're so disconnected in many ways.
Completely, yeah.
So how do you deal with the fact that you've got to be this public figure on social media?
I find it quite hard, if I'm honest with you. I don't know. I'm not one of those people that's very kind of tech savvy. I try my best to be, but it's not. I'm the kind of person will see something incredible out on the street or at a show or something like that, and 10 minutes later I'll be like, oh, I should have Snapchatted that.
Probably.
I should have WhatsApped that or whatever, and as such I kind of had to really try and, I suppose, teach myself to become a part of that surrounding. It's not that I've not got a desire for it, because ever since I was very young, even like the MySpace days and all that kind of stuff, I used to wonder like what it was that I was. Oops, knocked the bloody microphone off. I wondered like what it was that I was lacking or I wasn't quite doing that meant that I didn't fit in, or I didn't have as many followers as that person, or people weren't vibing that much on the music, when actually the music was great. It was just the fact that I didn't take the right angles, photograph or something. Do you know what I mean? Just all those extra pressures, which again, when you're a teenager or a young person, it's just another layer of like shit on top of the already like tempestuous life that you have as like a young adult. It's so I suppose as I got older, I kind of came to terms with the fact that I wasn't very savvy with all that stuff. I wasn't like a great blogger or a great photographer or any of that kind of stuff, and that I'd focus on what I was good at. But as time has gone on, it seems that it's become even more prevalent and even more important, and as such, it's kind of trying to bring that back out and kind of teach myself all that all over again.
It's hard if it's not innate to you
Absolutely.
and that you don't actually want to do it.
Exactly,
man. If you're a private person, you don't want to be talking about the ins and outs of your private life.
That's kind of it, and I suppose that's one of the bigger realizations on this record, is that we've realized that even even if it's not for the fans to be more honest, it's for us, to kind of make ourselves realise that we're actually comfortable to do that at this point, and that there are things that we'd like to talk about in order to help other people and to make it work.
Mikey had to perform before we'd finished our chat, so we reconnected the next day at H&B on Oxford Street.
You've been at Radio 1 today.
Yes.
And you were playing a gig last night.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know if after these kind of big events, whether you go over them in your head and you think, oh, I wish I hadn't said that, or, overthink it all.
I think it depends largely on what's happened, I suppose. I think in a lot of ways in my head I'm very much a perfectionist, but in reality that isn't always the case. I find myself very easily distracted. I'm quite forgetful and that kind of stuff, which kind of really rubs up against the perfectionist side of myself. It kind of grates against it, which I don't know if that's just come from like a weird sort of false perception of myself or something like that, or what I want to be. What I want to be put across as or portrayed as and stuff, which I suppose in some way comes back to what I want to put out for other people to kind of, take from an experience of being, seeing Mallory or hearing me talk or whatever it is. There's always second guessing things I've said or done to a degree, but I don't know. It doesn't necessarily keep me awake at night. It's what's happened has happened, and I kind of try and keep that as a mantra when something has gone a little bit peat-on.
That's good. What do you do, say, if there's been a technical hitch at a gig, and then the vibe in the dressing room is not ideal, someone's annoyed by it? How do you diffuse that situation? How does it manifest itself in the room?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of the time, we're all very honest with ourselves, and we're very kind of, we're quite emotional when it comes to things like that. If someone feels let down or upset or whatever, they'll make it known. They don't kind of internalise it, and it does definitely sour the air for a while, But I think, especially with us at the moment, it's more, I think you just kind of ride the wave on that. Like, you kind of have to just let it fizzle out or dissipate. Trying to justify something that you all know didn't go well.
Yeah.
There's no point trying to like sugarcoat it, or because you get that from so many other people. Which it's not a bad thing. Everyone's trying. People are trying to be nice, but let's be honest. If half the stage power dies and you have to stand there for 20 minutes looking like a twat, there's no sugarcoating that. There's no like, oh well, it didn't. I didn't even notice. You definitely did. Like, come on, let's just be frank about it. I think sometimes there's a bit of a dividing line between being complimentary and being supportive when someone's feeling particularly down or something, in a way that can maybe be constructive. But when everyone knows that it didn't go particularly well, it's just nice for people to be honest. For people to walk in and go, well, that was shit, wasn't it? Like, and you go, it was actually, and then
grieve together.
Absolutely, trying to beat about the bush sometimes just really isn't the way to do it.
Yeah.
No.
Now, those days that you wake up and you barely want to leave your bedroom, but then you've got to go maybe to Radio 1 or do interviews with people like me or speak to fans.
Sure.
What do you do? How do you get out of that funk or get yourself kind of public ready for it?
That's a good question. I think, to be honest with you, it's just been a long time of practice. It's been a lot of years of practice. In one form or another, we've been doing this kind of thing on this kind of level since we were about sort of 18, 19, so I'm 27 now, so it's nearly been like a decade of kind of doing that kind of stuff. And to be honest with you, like, I think to a degree when you kind of suffer with some sort of depression or anxiety and things like that, there's that game face, that kind of that face you put on day to day anyway. It's just a slightly different version of that in a way. Those days for anyone, when you have to get up and go to work, when you really do just want to stay in bed all day, or you really can't think of anything worse than talking to people, but you have to go and sit on that checkout or answer calls all day. Like, it's that same mentality, I suppose. It's just like that the person I'm meeting, it's not their fault, it's not their problem. Am I going to hinder their day by being an absolute tosser because I'm having a bad day? Well, then I'm going to do my best not to ruin their day as much, even if I am sort of struggling personally. Plus, also, there's a level of, they call it professionalism, I suppose, for a reason, don't they? And we all understand that in one form or another. people that work professionally. Do you know what I mean? You kind of just have to suck it up and get on with it, unfortunately. You know, even if sometimes that's the last thing you should do. I mean, I'm not saying that necessarily is very constructive, but it's certainly a way to survive while you get to the bottom of what it is that makes you feel like that.
Yeah. Did you at some point though maybe just avoid the situations? Did you just say, no, I'm not coming out? Did you ever go through that phase? I
think I definitely do have some days like that. But even then, I think, especially like when we're on tour, and maybe I've had like a really bad show, or I'm not feeling particularly well, or whatever it is, and you see like a couple of kids like stood outside in the cold or the rain or whatever, and they're literally just stood there waiting to see you. Like, it warms my heart to the point where it's kind of that sometimes is the only thing that can warm it, that can give me that kind of reality check again, that I was that kid at one point. I was stood out in, I don't know, Norwich at UEA or something like that, and stood outside the bus doors like waiting for some hero of mine to come down and say hello, and there were times where those bus doors would shut and you'd see them sat like from here to the camera away, kind of just not interested, not bothered, not interacting in any sense, and I kind of made a bit of a vow to myself all the way back then that I was never going to be like that, in whatever form that might be. And I think I'm kind of glad to say that I think I still have that to a degree, for sure.
Good.
But there are those days where you just want to kind of, I don't know, pull a Michael Jackson and put a blanket over your head and just bundle through and kind of get it done, But yeah, it's part of the job, You don't go to a garbage man and he doesn't turn around and go, oh, don't do plastic. You know what I mean? It's like,
is that recycling now? Is that a different
I suppose so.
Good point.
He actually probably does now. Poor example.
We'll pick a different analogy.
I'll think of another one.
Or
I'll get back to it. Please do. We'll do a different video on the revised analogies.
Third attempt. Oh God. Now, I want to talk about, obviously, anxiety and depression. It manifests itself differently for different people. There's lots of different symptoms, from shaking hands, insomnia, just not wanting to communicate, all sorts of things. What are the main ones for you, or is it a bevy of different ones?
No, it's a good question. I think sometimes it kind of manifests in slightly different ways. I think habitually I find crutches to lean on when I'm feeling anxious, and they're not necessarily a lot of the time the most healthy of crutches, and a lot of the time I'm very much oblivious to those crutches until it's kind of a little bit too late. I'm not in the sense that I'm not like doing heroin or something like that, but kind of the way that my eating habits and stuff, which kind of then turn into a bit of a spiral, like certain chemicals and things that you ingest and stuff, or the bad food that you eat kind of makes you feel worse, and that kind of takes you into a spiral, and eventually you kind of get 3 months down the line and you think, why is it I can't even pull myself out of bed? I don't even physically have the energy, and you realise it's because you've been, I don't know, stuffing your face with sugar for the last 40 days or whatever. But so things like that, or it's definitely vices are one. I think motivation. I think when you sort of have that anxious disposition where you overanalyze everything and everything is consciously at the forefront of your mind, you just become exhausted. It's difficult to have the energy to address anything. And that can include, unfortunately, sometimes really important aspects of your life. Especially when it comes to things like, families bicker and things like that. Your friends and stuff, they'll have like the odd bicker and stuff like that. But when you're on that edge all the time, a little fight, a little spat or whatever it is turns into something completely different, and you react and you respond to that in a completely different way that you would if you otherwise had a bit more of a level head. And that in my instance is me sort of ostracizing myself, separating myself from people. They don't deserve it. They don't ask for it. They're just behaving as normal human beings do. But it's myself that can't necessarily cope with that level of interaction or that level of intensity at that moment. So it kind of, I think in a lot of ways, the ways that those things manifest for me are always things that seem to make it worse, which is the worst thing. It's not like some people, they have just they get so pent up that they go and beat the crap out of a punch bag for ages, or like Sam, he does a lot of writing and things like that when he's feeling really uptight and stuff like that, and he gets it off his chest. But for me, it's almost like compounding and internalizing, and it just kind of it just gets to that point. Yeah, definitely. It's almost like a tri-yearly loss of all kind of, I don't know, reality. Really, it doesn't. It builds slowly, it builds very gradually and kind of subtly to the point where, and then it kind of rears its head, and then you go, oh, yeah, back to square one.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, it's a funny one. Yeah, there's no, I don't know, I could probably I was saying to my friends earlier, I was like, why have I got so little skin on my hands at the moment?
Yeah.
And then I realised that it's release week, and I've just been
gnawing
for
away.
the last week and a half or something. So I'll have stubs. But yeah, as you say, it manifests for so many people in different ways. And I think as I'm getting older, and a part of the journey that I'm on to discovering how to sort of either come to deal with this stuff or to beat it, is to recognise those things slowly but surely. And I think to end on sort of a positive note with that question, I think I'm certainly on route to deciphering the ways I do kind of. I do kind of deal with these things, and it does sort of appear with me personally.
Please keep your eyes peeled for the next part. Thanks for watching, and please leave any comments below. Till the next one, bye.